we're going to go ahead. I'm going to welcome you all officially to tonight's 18th. Can you believe it? We've done this 18 times. Almost live virtual VocalEye. I'm really excited tonight to introduce you to our guest. And we'll get to that introduction in just a moment. But first, I'd like to acknowledge that we are broadcasting to you this evening from the unceded ancestral lands of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And although all of us this evening are calling in from different unceded territories and different lands, it's respectful for us to pay acknowledgement to the fact that we're settlers on these lands and to take care of them as they were taken care of through history. So make that acknowledgement. Also, I like to remind people that VocalEye has been offering this programming free of charge. It's pandemic times, and if you happen to have the ability to make a donation, if you're in a position to do that, we absolutely would appreciate that. No pressure, but we will post the donation link in the chat for your quick convenience. It's also on our website, and we could circulate it in the email afterwards, the post-mortem email, the survey, if you will. And thank you in advance for any donations, and thank you to those who have already made contributions. It's your support that means so much to us and allows us to bring this programming and accessible programming to our community, because at the moment, there's not a lot of it out there. So further to that, as you all know, anybody can join us. All you need to do is register, info@vocaleye.ca, and just give us a few tips about you. So tell your friends, tell your family, let us know where you're from, let us know whether you identify as blind or partially sighted or whatever your terms are, and or sighted. If you have a family member or a friend that wants to join, we're open to everybody. So that's the fun of it all. And of course, we do have a draw tonight. In fact, we have 2 draws tonight. As we are nearing Thanksgiving, White Spot has donated a couple of gift cards. So we're going to do 2 draws for a $20 gift card. So we'll have 2 $20 gift cards to White Spot to be drawn this evening, and our special guest will assist with that. Take a breather, Amy, take a breather. I'm here to introduce you all to Cheyanne Turions. And some of you might recognize the name, some of you will recognize her face if you can see it, and some of you will recognize her voice when you hear it, because Cheyanne had experienced VocalEye through the Vancouver Art Gallery initially with some described tours that we launched in partnership with the VAG. So Cheyanne, jump on in. I think you're on mute if you're...
Oh, now I'm here. Hi,
you're
everyone.
here, you're here. Lovely, lovely, lovely. I'm so excited to have you tonight. We're going to introduce the installation in a second. But first of all, remind us of what you were doing at the VAG, because some of us were there for the initial opening. It wasn't a night, I wanted to call it opening night, but the initial opening presentation of the described tours, and there were a lot of people there. So what was your role in putting that together?
Well, at the Vancouver Art Gallery, I worked as the Director of Education and Public Programs. So the Described Tour program was something that I developed through the department that I was working in. Stephanie Bokenfohr was working as the public programs coordinator at that time, and she was instrumental in developing the program as well. We worked with Steph Kirkland to come into the gallery and teach the folks who were giving tours at the Vancouver Art Gallery about description. So they'd be able to incorporate description into all of the tours that they were giving, but also so that they would be able to offer described tours for folks who would be interested in coming. And I've thought about it as a bit of a, like, if you build it, they will come. Like, it was not my experience that many folks who were blind or visually impaired were coming to the gallery. And I thought that it would be a really incredible challenge to try and make visual art meaningful to folks who might not be able to see it in the ways that I see it. Mm-hmm. And so we started developing this program with the idea that it might be possible to develop an audience at the Vancouver Art Gallery who were, blind or visually impaired, and it was actually like one of the most like exciting and humbling things I've ever done in my career. Like saying what you see is really complicated in a way that I wasn't anticipating. Anyway, so Steph worked with the people who provide tours at the gallery. There was probably like 15 or 20 of us there. We did a couple of weeks of training together. Yeah, and obviously pandemic times have interrupted that program, and I'm no longer at the Vancouver Art Gallery. I actually left just shortly after we launched the program. But I think that, yeah, anyway.
No.
I'm at SFU Galleries.
Now I know where you're going. So I'm going to stop you before you get there, because the question is, what are you doing now? Where are you now? And how did you take the experience that you had with VAG into SFU Galleries?
Yeah, so now I work at SFU Galleries, which is a network of galleries throughout Simon Fraser University's different campuses. There's 3 galleries, one up at Burnaby Mountain, one in the Woodwards building, and one in Harbor Center. And so I've been there now for a year and a half, and it took me a while just to like orient myself to working there at all. And it's a very different kind of institution than the Vancouver Art Gallery, much more humble in scale, very different like orientation to public programs. Like we don't offer guided tours in the way that the Vancouver Art Gallery does. And I don't know if we want to talk about this now or later, but when this pandemic moment hit, I was thinking about what curatorial practice might be able to like offer to this moment. And I realized that SFU Galleries actually had very little to offer in ways of accessibility. And I thought, oh, how can we take this as a moment to try and like develop some infrastructures of accessibility that can extend beyond this moment. So trying to approach this very strange time that we're living in as an opportunity, rather than just like sitting around being sad because all the exhibitions I'd planned were canceled.
Right, of course. Welcome to the pandemic.
Yeah.
So out of that idea is sort of the birth of what we're witnessing tonight.
Yeah, so it became very clear, very early on, that what we had planned for the summer wasn't going to happen in the way that we thought it was. So yeah, our original programming was delayed or postponed or canceled. And with the other folks that I work with at SFU Galleries, so Karina Irvine and Christopher Lacroix, who work as gallery coordinators, we got together and co-curated this exhibition called The Pandemic is a Portal. And the title of the exhibition references the thinking of Arundhati Roy. And she published this really beautiful essay in the Financial Times, of all places, which I don't know why that surprises me, but whatever. And it's an essay that talks about the fact that like pandemics have always been moments where, societies break with what has been to become something else. And I became really interested in thinking about how our responses to the pandemic could prepare the ground for a different kind of world afterwards, like not a return to normal, but perhaps something that is like more just and more unsettled and more tender than the world that we left behind. And so we offered this as a prompt to the artists that we invited to be part of the exhibition. And so all of the there was 20 projects that we presented, 19 of the 20 were made in the time between when we offered the invitation and when we opened the exhibition. Mm-hmm. And so all of the artists were thinking, in their very specific and different artistic ways about this link between like how we act now and the world that will come after. And so the project we're going to be listening to tonight, Sharona Franklin's Tellurian Dinner, was one of those projects that was presented as part of the larger exhibition, The Pandemic is a Portal.
All right. I'm really excited to share this with everybody, and we'll unpack it after we have a chance to experience it. We'll go through some of it in more detail because this is it's a 15-minute roughly audio tour with some photos. And then because we know that not everybody can benefit from the seeing of the photos, we'll go back and go through some details of those. Stephanie Bokenfohr, who is joining us as a guest this evening, has been the one who wrote and recorded the audio description for this project. Now we also, hi Stephanie, she's waving to everybody. We also experienced Stephanie's tour at the Canada Line station earlier. So Stephanie is a familiar face, a familiar voice, a familiar human to this group of people. So it's really wonderful to experience another piece that Stephanie has put together. So we appreciate that. Share with us a little bit, Cheyanne, before we hear the tour, what it is that we are about to expect from this particular artist. And again, we'll unpack some of that again afterwards. But if you had to set this up in any way, how would you do that?
Well, the project is called Tellurian Dinner, and maybe we can talk about this afterwards, but Tellurian means of the earth. Mm-hmm. And so it is a project that was presented in the window space of Audain Gallery. So it was only visible from the street. And what you saw from the street was a very long space filled up with hay on the ground. There was a very strange dinner setting at one end, and then a long wall that was filled with posters with text and images on them. And so it was it's oriented towards the street. So it was something that people would walk by and perhaps look at, perhaps not look at. And it was the only project that was part of the pandemic exhibition that was physical in that way. Everything else was presented on Instagram or on our website. But we decided to activate this window space as a place where we could present art safely, relatively. I don't know if that.
Okay. Is this window space still active, or is this particular exhibition not there anymore?
Yeah, this exhibition has closed and is done, but we continue to present projects in this window space. So there's a project there right now by Tanya Willard that you should definitely go check out. It has like a daytime presentation and a very different nighttime presentation. So if you're able to, I would suggest you go see it twice. But yeah, it continues to be a place for SFU Galleries where we present art. Our galleries are not open in the way that they used to be still. So the windows, I think, provide an incredible opportunity to continue to address a public.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing at the moment. And it's interesting to me because some theater companies are coming back slowly. Some galleries are opening slowly with, limited number of people and limited seats available, that kind of thing, by appointment only, those kinds of experiences. But what's really unique about a window, now, provided you can see through the window, is that it actually ticks all the boxes of the like COVID restrictions, which is you're outdoors and you're likely social distance and everybody's probably wearing a mask and so that's kind of a unique experience. And I'm just kind of wondering, before we get into this particular tour, how often you change out this window, and if that's more frequently because of the pandemic, because people have different things to say, or is it, every 6 weeks, doesn't matter what's happening, we switch out this window?
We have, Tanya's project that is there now is only the second project that we've done in the windows, and we'll have another one in January. So it's a pretty slow pace as far as the changeover goes, because oddly enough, it's not really less work.
I wouldn't think it's less work, but
yeah. I think about it, the opportunity that I'm offering artists as something like, instead of having 3,000 square feet, you have 300 square feet, and it has very particular viewing conditions. And so I really am thinking about them as exhibitions. But it's interesting too, because that building, it's a new building. It's not the old Woodward's building, but the psychic life of that spot, is very much
a vibe.
So, yeah, it's like, a place where like commercial activities have been going on for many, many decades. And so I just think it's interesting to try and like use a window space, which would usually be a place where like commerce is happening. All the other windows on the street are like that, but to try and do something that interrupts that.
Anyway. Something special, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Speaking of something special, We are going to now listen to Stephanie Bokenfohr's described tour of Tellurian Dinner and by Sharona Franklin. So, Rick, I'm going to ask you to take it away.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Bokenfohr. I was asked to provide a described tour of Sharona Franklin's window project on behalf of SFU Galleries, so I will be describing the art installation entitled Tellurian Dinner, presented as part of the exhibition The Pandemic is a Portal, taking place over Instagram at SFU Galleries and here on the SFU Galleries website. Tellurian Dinner is a site-specific window project in SFU's Audain gallery location, meant to be visited in person primarily by local residents of the downtown east side. I will be describing the experience of this artwork in such a way that is oriented toward listeners who are blind or live with vision loss, creating an opportunity for all to appreciate the work. Sharona Franklin is a multidisciplinary disabled artist, writer, and activist who has been based in Vancouver's downtown east side. Her work explores radical therapies, cybernetic craft, bioritualism, ecology, pharmacological, and social interdependence. Concepts of care, the ceremony of taking medicine, and being part of a bodily reaction are central to her work as it asks us all to consider what rituals we employ to heal on individual and collective levels. Tellurian Dinner is contained within a large bank of storefront windows, which are located at the address 149 West Hastings Street. The installation consists of 5 large posters adhered directly to a wall that runs parallel to the street, and at one end of the corridor there is a circular dinner table, low to the ground, with 5 place settings. To walk the length of the installation took me approximately 14 steps. However, these works are meant to be stopped in front of and read, analyzed. The ground and windowsills are covered in hay. Imagine the smell of an open field, of being outside on land. Each of the posters are text-based visual poetry, written in the English language. Language and prose are central to Sharona's practice. I will recite parts of the texts, but I would like to focus on visual components such as layout of these poems, as each poster has distinct and specific typography and design elements that convey the artist's interest in objects and imagery that intersect her ongoing medical treatments and everyday life. You can download the Word document on this website below, entitled Tellurian Dinner Poster Text.docx, and listen to the complete text. Approaching the first poster, part of it reads, "Western medicine is classist, inaccessible to many, and a form of colonization itself." This statement is in a typeface that to me evokes the digital, reminiscent of older computer screens, and in the poster design it is being held up at the top of the page by 2 vertical columns below and a firm horizontal line where more text can be read. The type design of the text on the bottom ranges from digital to a typeface that looks like it could be from an old manuscript or a biblical type of publication. There are illustrative formations and curvilinear shapes around the border that, to me, evoke veins or vascular muscles in our body. Moving on to the next poster, there is one central question. How many disabled people do you love and give respect to? This question is centered in the poster and spelled out in typeface that, again, reminds me of religious scripture. Forming a border around the poster is text that reads, "Venerate Indigenous disabled lives. Venerate trans disabled lives. Venerate Black disabled lives." These statements are in all caps, and though the words are still, their designs to me suggest movement, as if they are flickering from an electronic billboard. This is because the letters are formed by dots rather than lines, which makes them seem like they are composed of many small light bulbs. In this way, the perimeter text also reflects the trope of breaking news, advertising, or mass media as presented in public places. This could be the artist bringing attention to how we are sold messages to buy into, which are prescribed to us without our conscious self being aware. In which case, the artist is asking us to think about these messages that we are constantly being fed. I also want to think about Sharona's use of the word venerate. It is a verb that means to regard with great respect, to revere, and it is often used in biblical or religious texts. So again, this association of our bodies paying attention to or being prescribed into certain religions or ideologies is one way that the artist thinks about how we create our own understandings of care and ceremony. Each of the posters have black backgrounds with white text. Although black and white are generally understood as opposite of each other, these posters rely upon their visual relationship in order to be legible. I wonder if part of Sharona's project is to use this design to point toward how the structure of binaries in proposing difference actually skirt around dependent relationships. For example, it might seem that humans and technology are distinct categories, but so much of human life relies upon our relationship to technological systems and devices. This design points towards the medical system as well, in my view, conjuring up ideas of x-rays, scans, and black and white medical reports. In a conversation I had with Sharona, she shared that she doesn't want her message to be exclusive. And I think this is demonstrated in the varying use of typography and layout, which do not subscribe to any one form of communication or style. The fourth poster contains the most amount of text. Visually, it reads like a manifesto, full of fine print, which is nearly unreadable from the street, evoking the kind of text that one might find on a medication label listing the side effects or warnings of that prescription. Spelled out in large font towards the bottom reads, "Healing is a non-linear pathway." The text is bordered with illustrations that look like they could be porous membranes or tissue that is within our bodies. So again, I detect associations with biological life and cells, our blood moving through our veins, oxygen pockets in our lungs, the nervous system and the lymphatic systems that allow our bodies to function. To Sharona, medications are healing agents that her body requires to live. They are radical antibodies, non-corporeal, cellular structures that have no body until they take shape in her body. Now, arriving at the opposite end of the corridor to the table where one could imagine a dinner is expected to take place. As I mentioned earlier, there are 5 place settings. In the center of the table, there is a candelabra filled with 2 candlesticks that have been burned down. What remains is a length of candle approximately as long as my index finger. With the dripped wax that flows over the candelabra, it is clear that these candles have been used in past dinner parties or ceremonies. The scene suggests that a thoughtful and special dinner might take place. I imagine the host of this dinner wants to ensure the guests feel welcomed to enjoy this feast. As the curatorial descriptive text explains, quote, "To be Tellurian is to be terrestrial, and in being so, to be a thread in a network of relation that reaches to every crevice of the earth," end quote. To be telluric is to be of the earth, of the soil. One could think of the title of the work, Tellurian Dinner, to be a prompt to consider our telluric response, our bodies in relation to the earth, and how the performance of daily life is, in many ways, the enacting of large and small rituals. Each place setting consists of papier-mâché charger plates that the artist made by hand. Charger plates are used at fancy dinners where full-course meals are served and attendees might dress up for whatever the special event might be. These charger plates are superfluous in that they have a decorative purpose only, serving to set a tone of care and ritual. Each charger plate has extending finger-like stems that braid and encircle one another around its edge as a kind of adornment. Bring your hands together and entwine your fingers. That is the feeling of these papier-mâché charging plates. On top of each plate are cakes made from gelatin. Shiny, lustery, jelly, but perfectly circular cakes. Think about the shape of a bowl, like a fruit bowl, as a mold that was filled with liquid that formed solid and turned upside down to make the form of a jelly cake. This looks like a feast for royalty, except that within the gelatin cakes are metal screws, large pieces of metal, chain, and bolts from construction sites. As well, there are natural materials, rocks, dried flowers, and plants frozen in the shiny, jiggly jelly cake. Previous concerns for medicalized life reappear here, and there are also pills and syringes, medicines suspended in the jelly. Circling each of these cakes are garnishes of dried flowers and plants. The entire scene is set upon a bed of hay, which extends from covering the floor beneath the posters to encircling the table settings. I'm reminding you now to remember the smell of hay, the smell of land, and being in an open field. These cakes are inedible, as the metal pieces attest to Sharona's concern for the rapid construction of condo towers in the downtown east side and how this displaces bodies and lives and communities that pre-exist gentrification. This capitalist force takes a toll on a telluric or collective central nervous system of life in the neighborhood. When I look at the dried plants that are part of the dinner setting, I can smell, I have the smell of eucalyptus in my mind, and it makes me yearn to be with nature. I think Sharona is also pointing toward interconnectivity, like how there are studies that trees communicate with each other through their root systems. Sharona always uses organic material in her works, and so her art inevitably decomposes over time. Materiality is key to her practice, as is the process or life of the materials she uses. In order to make these jelly cakes, gelatin is poured in very thin layers and left to set, slowly congealing the objects within its delicate structures. The paper mache also takes time to dry, and she says that this slowness of waiting for things to happen is also how her body works. There is a pace at which things happen, and you have to have patience for the alchemy of these things to come together. The jelly cakes will slowly decompose over the run of this exhibition. What I am describing now as the exhibition opens will look very different when the exhibition closes. The jelly will probably seem to melt and perhaps even turn into like a dust, and the paper mache plates will lose their structure, and perhaps even some sort of life will emerge from the flowers and hay. Decomposition is its own process that asks us to think about degeneration, paying attention, rituals of care, and the fact that regeneration comes next. Tellurian Dinner is to me an uncanny and almost absurd situation of a dinner party, not one that I would like to be invited to, but perhaps on a metaphorical or metaphysical level I already am at. I'd like to thank Sharona Franklin for sharing her experience through a material practice that invites us all to engage in consciousness-expanding endeavors and to consider disability, gender, class, and biocitizenship to form new kinds of mythologies and rituals. I hope you've enjoyed this description, and thank you for listening.
All right, lots to unpack there. Pretty interesting stuff. Lots of themes of, gentrification, colonization, the medical system. Oh my gosh, there were so many themes. I had a hard time keeping track of all of them, but somehow, like puzzle pieces, they come together to form this creation that Sharona has put together. It's quite an interesting piece. So let's unpack some of this for a little bit. And I know that we've got Rick standing by to bring up some of the photos so that those who can see them can get kind of a closer, better look, and then we can describe them. And if anybody has any questions, we can do that too. But first, here's what I want to ask you. There are a couple of terms here that were expressed to us, and I wonder if we can just dive deeper into these terms. So one of them is venerate. Now Christy's the English teacher, she knows these words, I'm sure. I, for the first time, had heard the word venerate, and for the first time had heard the word Tellurian. So why do you think Sharona chooses these words, and how does she utilize them to make her point?
Well, to be honest, this project was the first time I'd ever heard of the word Tellurian either. So I'm learning right along with you and the rest of the people who might not have known it. And it was funny, as I was preparing for this tonight, I was looking it up in a couple of dictionaries that I have. I have this one dictionary that comes from like 1876. And I was like, awesome. I wonder what how the definition would have changed from then until now. And interestingly, my 2010 dictionary and my 1876 dictionary, neither of them had the word Tellurian in it.
No way.
So, I mean, I only know as much as, the internet and or this project tells me, which is that, to be Tellurian is to be of the earth. And I think that in Sharona's project, part of what she's doing is, I think, celebrating a kind of connection between our lives and the earth in a way that I think there's something about the way that our society is structured that it like artificially demarcates between like humans and the rest of everything that's here on earth, like we're some kind of like special creation. And I think that part of what Sharona wants to do is like think of her life alongside other forms of life in a way that doesn't make a distinction or a difference, and that extends in perhaps like the opposite direction as well. I know that in my conversations with Sharona, like she, you know, takes a lot of medicines and, you know, she works with gelatin. And I know that she's received a lot of like critical feedback, let's say, about like working with gelatin, which is derived from animals, and or, you know, choosing to have like her disabilities dealt with through a medical system. And I think it's important for her to recognize that like those parts of life are as Tellurian as the hay that's in the exhibition. To her, it's a web of all of these things in creation or in relation that support her existence. So that's what I would say about Tellurian. And about venerate, I mean, I think of those posters as a kind of poetry. And so venerate to me is just like a beautiful word that talks about a relationship between oneself and another or an other. And that venerate is a relationship that is like lush. It is about devotion. It's about celebration. And I think that when she's saying like venerate trans disabled lives, venerate Black disabled lives, venerate Indigenous disabled lives, what I feel like the consequence of that is that, or what I think she's pointing to is like how that makes like that web of relationship for all of the things that are in that web of relation. I would say as the curator, but I don't know. I mean, I would be interested to know if other people had different readings of it in watching or listening to the tour.
Yeah, you know, I again had never heard either of those words before. And so for me, I mean, I love learning new words because I suppose at some level it reminds me how ignorant I am to not know some of these words, but it also invokes something in me because there's a bit of a juxtaposition, and I think there's a lot of juxtapositions in this installation in general. But in terms of the language, I would hazard a guess that there are a lot of average human beings out there that have not experienced these words. And so that juxtaposition on its own, that you're learning something new about language, also seems to me to be really interesting in the grand scheme of the juxtapositions. I do want to remind people just we are recording this session. So when you have questions, I'm absolutely going to honor your raised hands. But please, if you want to have a chance at the end of our Q&A with our guest, that you can raise your hands. Okay, so here's one of my favorite juxtapositions. And I'm bouncing around a little bit because I want to point out the pieces that I got really excited about. The metal objects inside the gelatin. So first of all, you've got and Sharona talks about them being about gentrification, about the building of condos, and I wonder if they are also about the pieces that keep our body as people with disabilities, keep our bodies assembled. If there's something in there about how you need to medically fix the body. Do you have any insight on that, Cheyanne, that you can help unpack with us?
I mean, I think it's absolutely there to be read that way in the work. I mean, what I think is interesting about what you're proposing, Amy, is that like it's not like the installation is casting judgment. It's more like I feel like it's invested in dismantling what would otherwise be a binary. Like, and again, I think this goes back to her thinking about things in a web of relation. You know, it's not that well, yeah, I mean, gentrification is bad, but also she lived in the downtown East Side in one of those condos. I mean, she was, she doesn't live there anymore, but
so she's really experienced firsthand something that she's wanting to share.
I think so, very much. And like, yeah, she self-identifies as a disabled artist. The image that we showed of hers has her using a cane. And so, I mean, the cane is made out of wood, but it's interesting to think about, all of the devices that all of us use, including these computers in front of us, are like made of this metal as well. Like, we all have these kind of like assistive devices around us all the time. And I think that ideally, or not ideally, but to me, one of the things that is rich about her project is the way that it can encourage a kind of like a recognition of oneself in the other, or vice versa.
Right. We do have an image of Sharona, and why don't, since you brought it up, I was going to wait till the end to share that, but why don't, since you brought it up, it's fresh on our minds, maybe we can ask Rick to put up the first image of Sharona, who's the artist, Sharona Franklin. And because the piece, okay, so Cheyanne, you've offered to describe this photo for our viewers.
Yes, and I will preface this by saying that although I did the training with Steph Kirkland, I am unpracticed in description. So I just want to acknowledge my own sort of like capability or incapability here. But I wrote out a description to describe this image of Sharona. So this is what I would say. This is a portrait of a woman standing in profile with her head turned, facing out from the image. It's in a studio setting, so she seems to be existing in a space of only prage light. And prage is a made-up name for a color, or a name that I made up for a color that combines the warm tones of pink, gray, and beige. So her long dark hair and blunt bangs spill out of a kerchief that she wears wrapped around her head, and its prage tones match with the long prage trench coat that she has wrapped around her body. Her left hand, which is closest to us, holds a sparse bouquet in her bent arm, where some of the cuttings press against her chest and one of her cheeks. Her lips are slightly parted as though she's whispering to the flowers, and her right hand balances her body on a brown cane that extends beyond the bottom edge of the frame.
Unpracticed? I'm sorry. It sounded pretty good to me, Cheyanne. I'm loving the new word prage. I think you need to send that to somebody who puts things
trademark it.
Yeah, I think it's up there with the made up words that become mainstream, right? Prage. So with all the prage that's happening in this photo, because it sounds to me, the kerchief, the trench coat, the wall, does her image stick out, or does she blend in? Is there a blending effect because there's so much neutrality in color?
In my opinion, yes. I mean, like her dark hair is definitely the thing that like stands out most to me when I look at this image. And then in the bouquet that she's holding, there are some yellow flowers. So the sort of brightness of the yellow flowers and the darkness of her hair stand out against this sort of like this wash of color to me.
Okay. I'm going to ask Rick to pull up another photo for us now, because we had talked about these 5 posters, these black and white posters that really, that's the only thing they have in common with each other, is their sort of black and white color scheme. Other than that, their borders are different. Their text styles are different. So they're saying different things, very different things, while being similarly connected. And there was a couple of them that weren't fully read out. And I'm wondering if we can just go take a look at some of those posters and see if we can pull some text out of those for the benefit of the audience. I know they threw out a web link that we could check out, but since we have you here.
Well, the ones that have more text are actually quite difficult to read, but there is one that has sort of like a medium amount of text. And it says, when a plant loses its ability to hear itself exist, it will emit gases and resonate at a louder frequency until it is able to sense itself again.
Ooh.
Which I think is incredible.
Ooh. I don't think I was prepared to hear that, to be honest. uh, why do you think she chose this? And here's the other thing. Are those Sharona's words, or is this a quote from somewhere? Is there
No,
any
those are her
indication?
words.
Those are her words. Okay, so she's again making a statement about life and about experience and about it's heavy stuff. I'm really appreciative of this, but I it's heavy. There's a lot of very complex themes here.
But I think, yeah, again, I mean, I'm, displaying my
You are our
my
eyes to this exhibition.
Yeah, I mean,
at
it's
the
my
moment.
predilections or whatever, but I think that, the fact that she's talking about plants and their ability to know themselves, their ability to respond to their environment, I think is to induce in us, the readers, an awareness of how closely their forms of life resemble our forms of life.
And so I'm trying to make out, so I can make out 5 black squares, or rectangles rather, that are that have white text that I can't read. Tell me, just to identify, which numbered poster from left to right, 1 to 5. What number is this one you just read?
One in the middle, so number 3.
The one in the middle, so number 3. Because what I'm trying to make out around number 3, and maybe you can be my eyes here, is the border that's around it. It seems to me to be rather, look, Rick is zooming in for the benefit. Now it's very different to me, because I was going to suggest that it was kind of floral, but I think it's more like fingerprints or swirls or something.
Well, interesting to think about the connection between those two things, I would say.
Yeah, when I look at it, so Rick's magnified it now. I've used my magnifying glass on it. I see fingerprints, which actually fits in nicely when Stephanie was talking about the themes of the cells and the organs and the lymphatic system and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, or X-rays. I hadn't actually thought about X-rays when I saw these posters, but hearing Stephanie describe them, I was like, oh my God, obviously.
That is so fascinating to me. Okay, thank you, Rick, for zooming in. You can go back to the 5, because the image is actually quite stunning of these 5. Again, there's very high contrast, like an X-ray. You're right. It's very high contrast, but each border is very different, and each piece is saying something individually and collectively, which is super fascinating to me. What do you think it means to have the hay introduced in this part of the hallway? So this is a long hallway lined with hay with these posters on the walls. But again, we're talking about a very different juxtaposition between something that seems very cold and clinical and something that feels very organic and natural. So what is that about?
I mean, I think that juxtaposition is it exactly. I mean, if you can imagine this in situ, so it's in the downtown east side, it's surrounded by other kinds of concrete structures. And then all of a sudden you have this wash of hay in a window as you're walking or driving along. And just right now, I'm feeling that what it does is remind me, it's sort of like it collapses time. It's like at this moment in time, we have these concrete structures, we have a city. Before this, we had, fields, perhaps some of them full of hay. In, a couple hundred years, it's probably going to be fields, maybe full of hay. So I think about it as like conjuring the other life of that space, what preceded it and what will follow. But again, this is like open to interpretation. So
No, I mean, I giggle inside because I'm so appreciative of your interpretation, of Stephanie's interpretation, because that would have flown way over my head if I was trying to figure this out on my own. And sometimes I feel a little bit like that with sort of visual art installations, is that there is so much happening, and I wonder if I was even a fully sighted person, if I would be able to connect the dots in that way. But certainly I miss the gap. So for me, the larger picture of this is something that I miss, putting it all together. So thank you for that, because that conjures up a whole different, it's a whole different set of themes for me. Okay, so let's transition down this hallway and head towards the dining room table. Because at the end of this hallway is kind of an open space. It's also, the ground is also covered with this hay material. And I don't know if you can tell visually, you probably can't. Actually, you've seen this in person, so you would know this. How high off the ground is that hay? Are we talking like 2 feet of hay, or are we talking like an inch of hay? How much straw and hay has she got in this installation?
Probably like 6 inches of hay. I
Okay.
can tell you that I drove to a farm in Abbotsford to buy 5 bales of hay, and we
You
used
did
one
it.
and a half. Yeah. So hay really expands when you unpack it from a bale, is one of the things that I learned.
Okay, I have to know. What did you do with the leftover hay?
We gave it away on Craigslist.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
some farmer got a benefit of that for some horses in their barn or something, I guess.
Or like, I think local people who had gardens could use it for like frost cover or whatever.
Oh, that's totally
Yeah.
interesting. I wouldn't even have thought of that being a utilization for it. Okay, so this image is an aerial of the dining space.
Yeah. And this is obviously not an image that, or this is not a real photograph. So this is a composite from many different photographs that the person who documented the show put together to try and give a sense of what it would look like from an aerial perspective, but this isn't an actual aerial shot. So I'll just say that.
Oh, well, you fooled me.
Well, she's brilliant. She's brilliant.
No kidding.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting actually to look at this image because it's not something that somebody on the street ever would have had access to. You know, from the street, you see the dinner from one perspective only. The documentation gives you different perspectives. The described tour gives additional perspectives. So I like thinking about all of these things sort of like knitting together in different ways to give people a sense of what the project was. Yeah, sorry, I can't remember what your question was, Amy.
No, well, I didn't ask a question actually, but so I was talking about it being an aerial, and so what I see is the 5 place settings, but there's something in the middle, and I know that candles were described, but there's a shape there that I can't quite make out.
Yeah, it almost looks like a 5-pointed star, but it's
okay.
It's composed of different dried flowers and grasses that are sort of laid over top of one another.
Okay.
So some of the dried flowers that adorn the plates on their edges and some of the dried flowers that are actually inside of the jelly cakes reappear on the table as kind of like a decoration. But it also, looking at it this perspective, it looks very like witchcrafty to me.
Pentagrammy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if that's, I mean, I want to think that this is all purposeful, right? Like everything that's in here, it's like those hidden object kind of computer games where everything is saying something to you. You just got to be able to figure out what it is. And so again, I wonder now, like for me, this is introducing a celestial theme, which doesn't exactly fit into the other themes, but maybe it does, and there's a connection I'm not making. Does it fit into those themes for you? Is there something that you can share with us about maybe a celestial component to this, or am I just like walking in strange times here?
You know, personally, I don't get the celestial aspect, but looking at it like this and having it look like a pentagram reminds me of the use of venerate, which seems kind of like spell casting language. And yeah, I wonder if there's maybe something going on in this exhibition that's a little bit witchy.
Well, the other thing too is that, you had referenced when we took a look at the picture of Sharona that she was holding a sparse bouquet of flowers. And I wonder if there's any, again, this would be a detail that only your eyes would be able to see at this moment. Are there any similarities between the flowers she was holding and these flowers? Is there some kind of connection florally between these, or are these a completely different type of organic material?
I can't speak definitively, but they seem somewhat related, like the way the dried flowers are laid out. Like there's a bunch of them making this shape, but it somehow has like a sparse feeling to it. And I would say that sparseness from the bouquet that she was holding in the image to the way that she's laid the flowers out here have something in common. But I think that actual plant material is different from here to what she was holding in the other bouquet. But yeah, they like share a aura or a vibe.
Yeah, when I think about things like gentrification, like what was talked about in terms of these cakes, which are on this table, sort of around this 5-pointed star, we're calling it, of shrubbery. Inside these gelatin cakes are these suspended pieces of metal, and so some of it's chain and some of it's screws and some of it's nuts and bolts and washers and construction materials. And I wonder if there's, so okay, this is not an eloquently put question, but I wonder if the message of gentrification in terms of the construction stuff in these cakes somehow relates to the sparseness of the floral, because what gentrification does is takes people and sparses them out.
Mm-hmm.
It
also
forces
like
them
literally
to
overwrites the land and gets rid of the plants and animals that are in spaces, right? So I don't know, I think that's a really interesting connection.
When I think about this and the way my eyes kind of play tricks on me sometimes, I feel like, had this tabletop itself been so let's say that the cakes were not there and it was complete dried shrubbery, and as the cakes move in, the shrubbery kind of retracts to the center. And so it's kind of like, as the condo towers go up, there's a receding of the environment, of nature, of people. I don't know, like there's a lot to unpack. And of course, the beauty of art is certainly the artist is saying something, and then certainly the rest of us get to take walks on tangents left and right and back and forth to discover things that, I don't know, that maybe challenge our thinking to some extent. So going back to these cakes, and I'm going to get you to talk about the process. And again, Stephanie described the process, but let's unpack that a little bit, how the cakes were created, because they're quite visually stunning to look at the same time, they're very sort of rudimentary. They're very organic. Okay, so unpack the process of having to create a cake like this.
Yeah, I mean, so they take days to make, because what she does is, she pours a thin layer of gelatin, lets it set, will like rest an object on top of it, slowly pour layers of gelatin around it. I mean, what is difficult to see from this perspective, at least, is that there's all of these different elements suspended within it. So it's sort of like the cakes almost, they seem like within them there's no gravity or something, like things are in positions where they shouldn't be or something, like
well, we can get Rick to switch to like a close-up or a side view of one of the cakes, and then maybe,
and what happened,
no, that's okay. And then maybe those who can see can get a kind of a close-up view of them, and then we can, because you're right, these metal pieces seem to be like floating in stasis, right? They're suspended. Yeah,
and there's all kinds of other stuff in them as well. So there's expired medicines of Sharona's in them. There's psilocybin mushrooms in them. There's syringes. There's flowers, some like sage leaves. Like there's all kinds of stuff that's in them. And part of what was really amazing to see when I was with them is the visual distortion that the jelly creates. So when you look at it head on, it looks very different head on than it does from the side, because the jelly, I don't know like how to explain this scientifically or whatever, but like the jelly refracts the light or bends the light, or it does something so that the objects get really distorted the closer they are to the edges.
Oh, interesting. That sounds like something you'd see at Science World.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, yeah, that's super interesting. And the jelly, is clear. It's kind of cloudy, but it's meant to be see-through for all intents and purposes. So this is not like, strawberry flavored Jello or something that's red. It's a clear color. Rick is zooming in here. This is a good close-up, Rick, because I think this has all the elements you just talked about. I think I see some floral. I think I see some screws. definitely see some pills.
Yeah. And so you can see the bolts there, like the bolt that's closer to the right-hand side, you can see it suddenly like is extending out as though it's rectangular, but it's actually circular. But
Yeah.
the bending of the light makes it look weird.
Yeah. Again, I super appreciate the fact that we've got these metals mixed with these organics on top of what looks to me to be crisp white linens,
Mhm.
which, yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to say that, yeah, part of what happened, and so there were a couple of images at the end, is that this was in, so the Pandemic as a Portal was 40 days long, because 40 days is a traditional quarantine period. Like when people used to sail ships from one place to another, they'd have to dock in a bay for 40 days because that was understood as a period of time that, you know, if there was like sickness or anything on board, that it would play itself out. So we thought, okay, let's make this exhibition 40 days long as a sort of, you know, like winking reference to the histories of quarantine. But over the 40 days, yeah, these gelatins decomposed. And like, let me tell you, it was vile. It was like totally disgusting. I can't even tell you. And on top of these paper mache plates, you know, so paper mache is made out of like newspaper and flour. And so there was like all kinds of weird, like growth and liquid that was produced from the decomposition, and like, you know, an odor that I will never forget. Like it was really disgusting.
You know, my my body leaps, my mind leaps to the body. And what's being said about the natural decay of the body. Um Talk about a smell you never want to remember and that you will never forget, right? One of the things that Stephanie had said in her description was that this was a dinner that she didn't want to be invited in, but was probably already at. And I thought that that was really one of the most beautiful things that I had ever heard. And so I super appreciated that kind of context, because it says a lot in a small sentence, which is one of the things that we kind of look for in description is language that paints a huge picture with a small amount of words, right? Because certainly I wouldn't want to be at this particular dinner, considering the menu. Oh, is that a picture of decay?
Yeah, some of the, yeah.
Okay. I missed that the first time around. And it's only since you're talking about decay that now I recognize that that's what that is. So maybe describe this to us. And thank you, Rick, for putting this up. Describe this one to us, because I think this may be interesting. It's close to Halloween.
Well, the mold looks like it's pockmarked. And in all of the pockmarks, there's this like fuzzy white, green, blue mold that's coming out of it. And on the paper mache plate around this pockmark molded decay is like a sea of sopping rot. As a kind of like, it almost looks like a halo. So you have this, yeah, decaying center, this like rotting halo, and then the edges of the paper mache plate.
So if you were to pick up that paper mache plate, I bet you it would leave a hole. Like, you know, the cake would just remain on the table. The plate would come away.
Yeah,
because
totally.
it's so saturated in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Lovely. I wonder about the process of tear down. So after 40 days, you have all this hay, you have all this decaying artwork, and you have these beautiful posters. What gets done with these pieces once this installation is finished?
Well, Sharona, the only thing she wanted back from the installation was the candelabra. So that we sort of picked that up off the table and put it aside, and then just put all of the rest of this in garbage bags, just everything straight into
including
a
the
garbage
posters
bag. Well, so the posters are made out of vinyl. So when you take them off of the wall, they're ruined. You have to like pull them off, and they get like whatever, distorted and crumpled, and
you're peeling them off kind of like wallpaper a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, everything here went into the garbage. And then I had gone to Costco and bought a lot of baking soda, which we sprinkled over the entire floor where this had been and just like left it for a couple of weeks to try and soak up the odor.
Right. Oh, it was that bad, huh?
It was bad. It was very bad. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is such a fascinating installation, and I certainly appreciate you unpacking it with this. So let's maybe turn the conversation just a little bit, because I don't see any questions, and I've got so many things on my screen right now. It's amazing. But if anybody has questions, feel free to raise your hand in the chat, and we'll call
Well,
on
maybe
you.
can I ask Stephanie a question?
Absolutely. You're the special guest. You can do whatever you want.
Well, cool. I'll see that Laura has a question also afterwards. But Stephanie,
great.
so now that you've seen the way that the works did decompose, I'm wondering what you make of it. Because one of the things that really stood out to me in listening to the described tour again was the way that you imagined how the decomposition might happen. And you like talk about the possibility of the gelatin turning to a kind of like dust or something. And what happened was like so much more like wet and goopy than that. And I'm wondering, just from like a curiosity perspective, what you make of how these decayed and how that might relate back to how you understood your description at the time.
I mean, it's still not a dinner party I would want to be at. But I think
I said you and I can make reservations somewhere else.
Yes. But in a way, it's like maybe when the gelatin decomposes and goes away, then those metal bits and like, it's not just metal bits, there's dried flowers and there's medicine and a lot of different, medicine in there, but those look like syringes or medications, which, many of us are very familiar with, and those aren't scary things. In fact, perhaps the metal parts are more uneasy, but at least when the gelatin decomposes, then you see what's there.
Mm-hmm.
And I like dried flowers for sure, but I don't want to eat a big metal bolt. So I think the charger plates is what I was really, it sounds like Sharona put so much time into making the charger plates and the way that the charger plates would react with the gelatin as it decomposed or melted or turned into dust. So,
And each of these charger plates seem to me to be quite different from each other.
Yeah, unique each. And
yeah. So they're while they're made of the same material, while they serve the same purpose, they're all different from each other. Okay, we're gonna go to a couple of hands. So we'll do Laura Ball because I know she's been waiting patiently, and then we'll call on Rita. So Laura, why don't you unmute yourself?
All right. Thank you, folks, so much. Lots of questions, but I, as Amy said, so many interesting themes.
Yeah.
I really liked what was raised at the beginning too about where this is situated, and kind of the contrast with the other things around it. And I guess my question is about the ideas of place and space, and I wonder if you can speak at all to kind of the differences between place and space and how this particular installation might shift this space, or perhaps this place into a space. I don't know if that makes sense, but you can speak to it if it does.
I don't know. Definitely the evocation of the domestic, I think, does something different in this window space than what other projects that have been presented there do. Like Stephanie was saying, like it's addressing the viewer as a potential participant and not just a viewer. And so I think that it's interesting. It's an interesting gesture to maybe like break down these artificial barriers between artist and audience. I mean, one other thing, I mean, this is diverting from your question, but one thing that I did want to say is that, when the pandemic first, I mean, I guess I touched on this a bit at the beginning, but when the pandemic first began, the downtown East Side response team was really discouraging people from coming down to the downtown East Side. So I knew that I wanted to work with an artist who lived in the downtown East Side. And I know that I wanted the project to address people that make their lives there already. And so the described tour and the documentation were meant to provide access for people who couldn't be there otherwise. But it was really important for me to think about who I was considering a potential audience person in like a political way. Yeah, and most of the people that were in the pandemic exhibition were local artists, and it just seemed really important for me to be working in community, even though the most dramatic, one of the very dramatic consequences of this pandemic has been the way that it has separated us out into the spaces of our homes. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but just some thoughts on space and place as they came to me.
Yeah, thank you. That's yeah, it's powerful, I think. And for me, when I'm thinking about place and space, I'm thinking about space being a place that has meaning, kind of. And it sounds like this is really this transformed this particular piece of the community, the downtown East Side community, into perhaps a space for some folks. Yeah.
I think Sharona would be really happy to hear you say that. Yeah.
Well, you can pass it along.
Thanks, Laura. I really appreciate that. Let's call on Rita, and then we're going to go to Andrew. I believe Andrew has a question. So Rita, we'll get you to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Okay, so my questions are not as deep. It's more like technical types of things. Like, for instance, when Stephanie, when you were choosing what part of the poems to read, you said you weren't reading all the text. Why did you choose to skip certain parts of it? Did you think it would be more meaningful that way or less meaningful? What was your idea in skipping some of the text? That's my first question. I have a couple more.
Yeah, that was a tough choice to make. I just felt that the typographic and visual components and choices that Sharona made were as important or even more important than the text in a way. And that was, a choice I made. But Sharona is an excellent writer, and the text is there to be read as well, the full text. And I thought that it might be a little bit boring if I were to just read or recite the texts.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to explain some of the visual components.
Yeah, and there was visually, you had described, Stephanie, that some of the text was even very difficult to read if you were a sighted person. And so I think that's probably some of the text you chose to not focus on, which probably was a good choice, considering that there's something to be said about the fact that the font was so small that it was almost illegible.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we'll probably end up circulating the link to the documents of the text post email for folks who want to take a deeper dive into what that text means. Rita, what's your next question?
Okay, my other thing is, what was it like living with this exhibition? Obviously, you were saying as it started deteriorating, it was stinking and all of that kind of stuff. But was it in an enclosed space? How did it not affect the people in the building, or what did you guys do about that?
That's interesting.
I was working from home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we put this up in the window, and then I went back 40 days later to take it down. Yeah, so we weren't actually working in the space.
Right. Okay. And nobody was in the building or in that area?
Well, there were, I mean, I don't know because I wasn't down there, but the
Right.
Woodward's building, or I should say the Goldcorp Center for the Arts more precisely,
Right.
has not been open to the public since March. Yeah,
Okay.
so there
okay.
might have been people in the building, but like the gallery space within the building has doors. So it would have
Okay.
been relatively enclosed.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Any
Okay.
final questions, Rita, or does that
One
satisfy your
more,
curiosity?
no, one more thing, and that was the thing, the process of setting the gelatin. Because I thought gelatin had to be refrigerated or something to set, but obviously this stuff was not refrigerated, right? So
You know,
what?
I don't know, Rita, but I think that she probably did refrigerate it as she was making them. And that the decomposition that happened in the gallery was reflected the fact that they were no longer refrigerated.
Oh, maybe that's okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And did she make it on site or did she make it at her home and then bring it in?
She made it at her home, which was a couple blocks away. And so,
Right.
yeah, we went over there with like a moto car share and loaded them up very tenderly
Right.
to
Right.
drive them
Right.
over to the
Okay.
gallery. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. As I said, not very deep questions, but I was just curious.
That's
I
All right.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
There is no
Thank you.
such thing, Rita. Ask any question is a good question, and I found the answers very stimulating. So thank
Okay.
you for that.
All right. Great. Thanks. Okay.
Andrew is next in line to ask a question or to register a comment. Andrew, can you unmute yourself?
I think I did I?
You did. We can hear
Right,
you.
there we go. I just wanted to talk about the word telluric
Great.
because, I mean, one way of looking at it is it's sort of is the difference between telluric and terrestrial. Terrestrial is sort of what's on the surface of the planet. It's where we live. Telluric refers to more of the planet as a whole, especially things like caves and secret places in the earth, where we get the metals that make the screws and bolts that are in the gelatin there. And the decay processes and the chemical processes that change elements in the earth could be referred to as telluric processes. So I think that word is used for a very specific reason, to talk about underground and to talk about how the parts of the earth that we take and use in our own way and that go through decay and return to the earth.
Like a full circle moment.
Yeah, I think, Andrew, you definitely know more about the word than I do. And I love the ideas that you just put forward about
Me
it.
too.
I think it really like suits the project. And yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So share with us, Cheyanne, what's next now for SFU Galleries? Are you planning to make all of your tours described? What's the next tour? What have we got to look forward to?
Yes. So in a practical way, Tanya Willard has an exhibition in the windows called Affirmations for Wildflowers and Ethnobotany of Desire, which if you are able to go pass by the windows, I would really encourage you to do. But like I said at the beginning, in trying to use this pandemic moment as an opportunity to build infrastructures of access, we will now do described tours for all of our exhibitions. So we're still very early in the process, but we opened an online exhibition called Make Believe Bathroom in September, and audio producer from Toronto, Aaliyah Pabani, has done 3 described tours for that, which are available on the project website. Stephanie Bokenfohr just finished a described tour for an Elizabeth Mackenzie exhibition, which is currently on at our Tech Gallery location, which is in Harbor Center, which again, like the building is not open to the public, but you can on Thursdays register to come by for a visit if you're so inclined, or, you know, look at the documentation and listen to the described tour is another way of engaging with her work. But the idea is that this is something that is now just part of what we do at SFU Galleries. Again, like it's great that it, you know, creates access for folks who live with vision loss. And I think that it's great that it challenges people who don't live with vision loss in how they make sense of the world. Like, I just feel like it's such a rich kind of project. And also at this moment where, you know, we can't all be in a space looking at art, to think about the different ways that we can continue to be in relationship to it. It feels like I would much rather listen to a described tour than like watch a drone video of an installation that I can't go into. Like, I don't know, not to diss any other art galleries that are doing that kind of stuff, but like, I find like the videos of objects in space, somewhat insufferable, but like listening to a described tour activates me. And this, I mean, gives away again my own predilections, but it activates me in like really exciting ways. And so anyway, we're going to continue doing this.
There was lots of really exciting things, like being reminded to smell the hay and the smell of eucalyptus. And those things in my mind, when I'm witnessing art through somebody else's eyes and their experience, those are the things that give me layers, that give me textures. And that, as you rightly point out, Cheyanne, are of benefit to anybody who wants to just experience this kind of art, like from a distance, right? I don't think that there's anybody who wouldn't get value out of experiencing this kind of tour. So we often discover that when we make something accessible, like text message was something that was created for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, and now it's more mainstream than probably anything on the planet, right? So we discovered this. I learned recently that the typewriter was actually invented for communication with a blind woman. So, typewriters turn into keyboards. And so accessibility, while it benefits those of us who may need the accommodation, also benefits a larger group of people. And I think the value that SFU Galleries is providing in these tours is immense. And so I thank you for doing that, not only on behalf of our community, but on behalf of all art lovers.